most of the time, you are in control of the custody as a police officer. He comes in and says, "Is these really necessary, or you need to take these off?" "No, sir, I don't."
So you don't have to,
No.
if the doctor don't treat you.
I mean, what he's going to do is go call your supervisor, and your supervisor can call you and say, "Hey, quick, take them off. I'm covered. I'll take them off now. Thanks." Right?
Yeah.
Now you've been given some instructions, right? So you take them off. I wouldn't ever take them off if I wasn't ordered. I just tell the doctor I'm not. And in this instance, the doctor called. He called my supervisor. My supervisor said, "No, my deputy's doing the right thing and to be on." The last thing you need to be aware of is when you're dealing with that is the most dangerous thing you'll do with a prisoner in custody, bar none, is allow him to go to the bathroom. That's the most dangerous activity once you've got somebody in custody. I didn't do it. If they're in the emergency room and they got to go to the bathroom, I made them bring them a big. "Well, I need to go to the bathroom." "Well, there it is." "No, I ain't doing that." "Then hold it." And they said, "Well, you're mean." "Yeah, well, that's the life of an outlaw. Tough, ain't it?" You know? Because I'm not, there's been more police officers killed with inmates stepping out of the bathroom who managed to get a handcuff key smuggled into them somehow, or have a handcuff key, and they go into the bathroom cuffed, and they step out uncuffed. And once they step out uncuffed, they have the advantage because it's a surprise. They're in your face. You're probably fatigued. You're not ready. And the next thing you know, you lose that fight. I watched a scenario where a deputy sheriff in Maryland was sitting with an inmate who had been admitted to the hospital. The inmate has to go to the bathroom. He steps into the bathroom. He steps back out. He's uncuffed. He straddles the officer is in a chair. He straddles the officer in the chair. He removes his weapon, shoots him 3 times on top of the head. He leaves the hospital room. A nurse hears the shooting. She hears the gun pop, and it don't really sound like a pop because he puts the gun right against the top of his head, sort of muffles the sound. He starts out of the room. The nurse goes around the corner to see what the problem is. They walk face to face. She says, "What the hell are you doing?" And he says, "Pop!" Kills her. He starts down the hall. People start freaking out. He starts shooting people on the hallway. He takes a boy and an older lady hostage, gets them on the elevator, goes down, walks outside the hospital, goes through the lobby, shoots 2 or 3 more people, gets into the parking lot, takes somebody else hostage, gets their vehicle, and he leaves, all while wearing a hospital gown. He's apprehended a little while later, but that all started with a trip to the bathroom. And that's more common than not. One of the things, Beckley, that was more interesting than my little story about the bathroom visits is we just were updated. There is no charges going to be brought forth in the taser case on the man who died after being tased at the hospital in Virginia. I'm sure civil suits will follow, but there are no criminal charges. That happened about 3 years ago. I don't remember the suspect's name. Do you?
I think the last name may be Martin.
Last name of Martin, maybe?
Is it the one that you were telling us about earlier in this message?
No, that, in that case, that was one that went to the 9th Circuit, and it was dealing with all electronics, not just tasers. Yeah. And of course, y'all already know I much prefer electricity over pepper spray. I hate pepper spray. It's treacherous. It's absolutely awful. Do what?
It don't hurt just the person you aim at.
No, yeah, it hurts everybody. If you spray somebody, you're gonna get some. You're gonna be exposed. You can't help it. How many people we got in Beckley?
4.
4. All right. So today I'm gonna start reviewing for the exam. There's gonna be roughly 90 to 100 questions. So I want to start reviewing today. I want to recover about half the questions today or thereabouts, and then we'll cover the other half on Thursday so that y'all be ready for the exam. I was going to try to wait and do it all on Thursday, but that seems a bit tough. Yeah, I think you absorb it better if we do it today. If we do half today and half Thursday. I know it slows it down a little bit, makes it a little more mundane, but we can cover it. Yes? Catch, right over Mr. Lee's head. All right. Let's start with use of force. Our use of force continuum. What does it encourage police officers to do?
Start out with the least.
Wait a minute, I gotta turn y'all's volume up. I can just barely hear you. Yeah, it's turned way down. Try again.
Start out with the, least amount possible. Basically, just talking to them without having to do anything dangerous.
Right, and that use of force continuum tells you that as their level of resistance increases, what happens to our use of force?
It increases.
Right. What is the scale that replaced the use of force continuum based on the Supreme Court case? Graham scale. Good, Graham scale. What is Graham versus who? Anybody know?
Connor.
Who said it? Somebody said it.
Connor.
Good. Beckley got it too. Graham versus Connor. Good. Good communication skills, improved training, and psychological testing are all effective or ineffective ways to combat excessive force.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes. Good communication skills, improved training, and psychological testing of applicants, of police applicants, are all effective or ineffective ways to combat excessive force. Effective, correct. They're all effective ways. Police policy should reflect what? Close. Yes, public opinion. I want you to change the word opinion to public's expectations. Yeah, but you're right. You're right on the money. Police policy should reflect the public or the community's expectations. Great. The cornerstone, the first piece of lowering the incidence of excessive force, I told you all over and over again during that week, would be what? I listed it in the last one that I gave you all just a few minutes ago, and I listed those as being effective. But I said the absolute cornerstone is?
Communication.
Close.
Psych.
Not the psych, not the communication. What's the other one?
Improved training.
Training. Training, training, training. If I were a police chief and I wanted to improve community relations, would I improve transparency in my police department, create a civilian oversight for complaints, or respond to citizen complaints swiftly?
All of them.
All of those. Good. Part of that training that I talked to you all about being the cornerstone, the police should offer operational, the word I want to use is, I know now. The police department should offer operational strategies in their policy to deal with violence. Is that a good idea or a bad idea for reducing incidents of use of force? Good idea. It helps the police to, it helps the officers understand. I'll give you a prime example. One of the questions that was asked earlier, we were talking about civil liability. And one of the questions that was asked earlier of me was this. And it's a question where I'm kind of the opinion there's no right or wrong answer. You pull up on a situation, you have an individual get out of a vehicle, he's armed. He starts to run. He's running toward an elementary school. You're in fairly close proximity to that elementary school. Do you shoot this as a police officer? Do you shoot this individual or not? Well, I was of the opinion of, like Mr. Primer, I would probably shoot him, but I want you to be able to articulate why you would shoot him. Why would you shoot him, Mr. Primer?
One, he has a gun, he's not aiming at you, he's aiming at an elementary school. One, that creates a huge problem.
So basically what I want you to be able to do is understand that you have to be able to articulate the risk to the public, right? And at that point, he's presenting a huge risk to a lot of children. So as long as you're able to articulate that risk and help make that decision. And so by presenting those types of scenarios in training, it helps you to prepare for those in the event that they happen. You have complicated training scenarios like that one, and then you have something simple like, sir, I'm going to place you under arrest for DUI, step out of the car, and he says no. How do you get him out of the car? Another situation for training that they need to incorporate into their training, that I hope they do. Y'all remember when the officer beat up the kid for not getting out of the chair this last year? That also needs to be incorporated into the training. How do you deal with defiant juveniles? Because this kid actually hadn't broken a law, just simply didn't want to stand up. Officers who have used excessive force, what type of consequences may they face? Civil and criminal. Good. It's not narrowed down to just one. Also, what is the other one? What's the big one that they face aside from civil and criminal? Losing their job. According to the study we were talking about during that week of class, strong supervision and more patrol officers on the streets would have no impact on the use of force complaints in an area. True or false?
False.
False. What would make that true?
Communication.
Well, the communication, absolutely. The part that would make that true is that strong supervision and more patrol officers would reduce the use of force, right? What's the highest level of use of force on the continuum?
Deadly.
Deadly. The new training that officers use on use of force is based, we've already covered that, never mind. Fleeing felon. What is that court case based on? The fleeing felon rule and being able to shoot the fleeing felon. What's that court case based on? Tennessee versus Garner? Yes, but there's another one that's a little more. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Terry versus Ohio. It is Tennessee. Tennessee is versus Garner is the fleeing felon. You're right. I'm sorry. Tennessee versus Garner. Based on the Graham scale, a court must look at the perception, the anger level, or the information, or the experience of the officer before deciding whether or not he used excessive force. Let me read it again. Based on the Graham scale, the court has to look at the situation based on the officer's perception, anger level, information, or experience before they can decide whether he's used excessive force or not.
Perception.
Their perception.
Good, perception.
I thought you meant that was like a true or false. That's why I was confused.
Police officers can best influence the use of force, along with police departments, by concentrating their efforts on clarifying what departments, what things in the department that they use. Is it the mission, the culture, the policy, or discretionary use of force? Policies. That is right, policies. What is a WMD?
Weapon mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
What does that include?
Chemical, biological,
Chemical, biological,
Nuclear.
nuclear.
You're missing one more.
Conventional.
Traditional, if it's big enough, that's right, but I've got one, there's one more on there that I'm thinking about.
Radiological.
Good,
Radiological.
radiological, good.
Isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't radiological?
No, the nuclear is splitting of atoms, and the radiological would be, it's a different type of it's like radiological is like a dirty bomb,
Oh, okay.
okay? There is radiation that falls out of a nuclear explosion, but the nuclear explosion in itself is a splitting of atoms, okay? And one of the consequences of that is the radiation that follows. But you can have a radiational bomb, like a dirty bomb, that goes off without the huge explosion,
Okay.
right? But I like the way you're thinking. I mean, you're absolutely right. What is accountable governance?
Government's held accountable for the needs of the people.
Right. The government responds and is accountable to the people for the needs of those people. Good. Putting video cameras on bridges and tunnels is an attempt to do what?
Harden staff.
Harden targets. Great. There are 56 field offices in the United States of NCTC. In those 56 offices, there is a WMD coordinator in every office. True or false?
True.
True.
That is very true. Homegrown terrorists are divided into two groups. What are they?
Jihadist and the right-wing extremist.
Good. Right wing extremists and jihadists. Great. Did y'all catch that? The protection of people from unreasonable search and seizures is found in what constitutional amendment?
Fourth.
The 4th. Who said 14th? Be careful. What does the 14th cover?
That's the
14th covers on Terry stops. It gives us the right to detain without arrest. Speaking of being detained,
How much do they do?
yeah, it could be an ambulance.
Someone in prison already detained.
To protect the homeland, to defeat terrorists, and to eliminate safe havens are all overreaching goals of NCTC. True or false?
True.
What is Operation Tripwire?
the largest.
I like it. So
It's the largest intelligence gathering and sharing.
good. Largest intelligence information gathering operation that the America has going right now. Great. Strategic operation centers are global, are supporting multiple operations simultaneously, have around-the-clock operations, and sustain uninterrupted power supply, or none of the above. Or all of the above.
It's all of the above.
All the
Yeah.
above.
NCTC does not defend food supplies. Strategic operations are conducted by the CIA only.
False.
Respecting human rights and rule of law are up to politicians, not the operatives in the field. True or false?
False.
That is false. It is important that we as operatives in the field working around the world respect the rule of law and human rights. Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq and Iran are all countries that do not have terrorist activities. This exam is going to be way too easy. The National Counterterrorism Center is a collaboration of all but which of the following? The DOJ, the DOD, Homeland, all of the above, or none of the above?
All
All
of
of
the
the
above.
The above.
Good. The NCTC focuses on identifying terrorist groups, coordinating local police operations, emerging threats, both A and C, or all of the above?
A and C.
A and C. What do they not do? They do not coordinate local, right? Do not coordinate local effort. Who provides warning and advisories to Americans traveling abroad? What part of the government? It is Homeland, and under Homeland it would be NCTC, right? Tell me about a terrorist list maintained by the United States government, known or suspected terrorist. Maintained by the FBI. Does it exist? Is it real? Does our government keep a current list?
Yes.
Just terrorism or most wanted?
Terrorism. Known or suspected terrorist list.
Yes, I do. I do.
They do?
I think so.
Okay, they do. No, I just asked a question. NCTC does not oversee assets around the world. That's left up to the CIA.
False.
There are currently over how many active operations going on in joint task force around the world?
100.
Over 104. Excellent. What is state terrorism?
Stay and act on its own people.
Good, good. That's state terrorism is where the state actually commits terrorism on its own population, on its own people. What is state-sponsored terrorism?
We're
The
state-
government provides money or supplies to terrorist groups.
Great. That is exactly what it is. Y'all hear that? What is state-involved terrorism?
Where one government commits active terrorism on another government or a private group.
Wow. Are you reading that, or do you have all that memorized?
I'm reading it out of my notes.
Okay, as long as you're marking it. I thought you was the best student I'd ever had if you knew all that.
I've got it marked.
All right, as long as you're marking it, we're good. Terrorist groups tend to reflect their motivation and, terrorist group targets that tend to reflect their motivation and influence. True or false?
True.
Tell me why terrorist groups commit acts of violence. Say again?
Spread fear,
Instill fear is number one.
gain recognition.
To gain recognition.
They want to weaken or embarrass our government.
Right, weaken or embarrass the government. That's good.
They
And the
want
last one? Say again? They do manipulate media, and that you're absolutely right, but I was thinking of a different one. They're always trying to free their hostages, always trying to free their political prisoners. They call them hostages, but they're really prisoners, right? How did we get Bergdahl back? Yeah, we gave them 6 terrorists for one guy who deserted, right?
Yep.
Which of the, I didn't got that one. Oftentimes, in a guerrilla war, acts of terrorism can be used to try to turn the tide of war. True or false?
True.
Terrorism influences its audience, beyond its audience, the media, or no one.
Beyond it, audience.
Beyond its audience, right.
11:26.
Certain behavioral traits identified in your notes indicate a terrorist behavior include all but which of the following? Coercive, inclusive, dynamic, or deliberate? Say it again.
Inclusive.
It is inclusive. What does inclusive mean? Accepting. That's a good way to describe it. Inclusive means accepting, tolerant. And there are a lot of things, but they're none of that, right? What's the difference between insurgency and terrorism?
She didn't say the word, it's like, they're not actually trying to, I don't know.
You got them backwards, but you're on the right track. I know where you're thinking. You're just gonna flip flop. Tell me what?
Yeah, one is
Go ahead, Beckley. What?
Yeah, let her.
The insurgent, they're a political fighter with a certain aim.
like a vigilante.
Right.
Is that what it is? Kinda, sorta.
Kind of, but basically, the insurgency is like she said, they're a political fighter. They have a political goal in mind, okay? Most of the time, insurgents want to overthrow the government, the existing government, right? They want to overthrow the existing government and put their own government in there.
They
They have a
consider
political
themselves,
aim in mind.
they consider themselves military, right?
They do consider themselves military. The other piece about an insurgent is they tend to only attack military. They tend to avoid civilian casualties, right? Now, insurgency will attack civilians if there's no other way around it, but that's not their original target. Their original target's more military.
Terrorists don't care.
And terrorists really, a terrorist organization doesn't necessarily have any political aspirations, right? They're committing acts of terror to make people afraid, to delegitimize the government, to do all of these things to weaken the social aspect of the country, and they really don't have any political aspirations. They don't like the government that they're attacking, but they don't particularly have any aspirations of replacing that government. The other piece is that terrorists don't make any distinction between combatants and non-combatants, right? They'll attack civilians just the same as they'll attack military type people. It makes no difference to them. So good. Y'all got that down. All right, let's jump gears here. Intelligence-led policing. What's the final step in intelligence-led policing? Assess. Tell me about assessment. So when we assess things, you're exactly right. We're doing a couple of things. One is we're going to look at how successful we were, right? Because in the beginning, we set forth some goals. These are some goals. These are some benchmarks we want to meet with what we're doing. So when we assess, we say, first of all, we say, hey, how successful were we? Did we meet our goals? Did we meet our benchmarks? And then the second part of that assessment is just exactly what he said. What could we change? What could we do different? What could we improve? What could we take out? What could we add? Right? Having that assessment, say again?
Is that also under reevaluation?
The only difference in assessment and reevaluation is as you go through a lengthy process, assessment will always be at the end. You may have a reevaluation before that process is complete, but it's basically the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If we're in a process where we're trying to lower gang violence and we're going to change the way we do things for the next 12 months, every 4 months we have a meeting and we have an assessment meeting or a reassessment meeting so we can decide whether we want to change what we're doing or whether we want to continue with what we're doing or just assess if what we're doing is being effective. And then we continue on with our operation. The assessment then would be at the very end when we look back and say, okay, how did we do across the entire thing? Make sense?
Yes.
But it's basically the same problem. What does assessment help to overcome? There's a law that we've talked about. The law of diminishing returns. What is that? Somebody tell me what that is. Assessment and reassessment helps us to eliminate the law of diminishing returns. So somebody tell me what that is.
So we don't go back to the way it was.
Yes, kind of, but
If you keep doing the same thing over and over, it's gonna eventually stop working.
right. So if we even though we've changed our tactics, if we keep doing that over and over and over again, criminals aren't stupid. I mean, some of them are kind of stupid, but they're not all stupid. And so they're going to adapt to our new methods, right? We do something new, they adapt to that, and then all of a sudden, we went from being pretty effective at what we were doing to not being very effective at all again. So our constant reassessment and our constant assessments of our job helps us reduce the law of diminishing returns, which means that we are constantly changing and evolving, and the criminal element does not have a chance to get used to our new operations so that they can avoid them, and our success rate will stay high. Right? Good. The assessment part of our equation does or does not make intelligence-led policing a scientific process.
Does.
It does. It absolutely does. Information dissemination should be managed according to those who need to see it and those who request to see it. True or false?
True.
Oh, I would have got you on that one. Why is that false?
Because not everyone has the right to view it.
That's
I mean,
correct.
that would be like public being allowed to review it and they're not,
They're not always privy to all that information. You're absolutely right. So you want to be careful when you read some of these questions and know just because somebody asks for something doesn't mean they're allowed to have access to it, right? What is the Kent model of policing?
that's like the problem-oriented policing. Wasn't that like under Herman Goldstein?
Yeah, I can't remember that guy's name. You've got me on that one. But the Kent model of policing, remember we talked to you about that being the kind of the first model of policing in Kent, England?
Yeah.
Right. And what were they trying to do? What crime were they trying to stop?
Property crimes.
Robberies. Right. Good. Y'all are 100%. POP and SARA are both acronyms for different forms of intelligence-led policing. True or false?
True.
True. POP-oriented policing is what? Problem-oriented policing. Tell me about that. Right. Long-term underlying cause. We're going to identify the problem and we're going to talk about the underlying cause and we're going to talk about strategies to combat that. One of the POP policing things we do and one of the SARA policing things we do is gangs. Because we have learned that arresting gang members doesn't reduce gang activity. What reduces gang activity? Education, job opportunities, those types of things. Now, Sarah, what does Sarah stand for?
Scanning, analyzing, responding, and assessing.
Good.
focuses on gathering the data and intel. You know, it's like more broad on for information.
That's right. And basically what happens with this Sarah is we stop making crime, Sarah and Pop really both, we stop making crime incident driven. What happens to it? We start giving more of a holistic view of criminal behavior, right? Sarah stands for scanning, analyzing, responding, and assessment, or assessing. What is problem clarity?
Is
Better picture on what causes the problem.
I'm along with that, but I want you to develop that idea some more. You're on the right track.
what did he say?
Problem clarity. If I were talking about problem clarity, how would I explain to people who've never been in our class, who have never dealt with intelligence-led policing, how would I explain to them problem clarity?
You have to put it in layman's terms that they can understand it, of explaining what the problem is in a vision that they can grasp.
Right, good. So if I were going to explain, or if I were going to talk about problem clarity, we're going to accurately and clearly identify and understand the problem, whatever that it may be, right? Because how can we as police officers in the community ever come together on a plan of action if everybody don't agree what's going on? Which brings me, you know, last chapter in the class right before this, we taught gangs. I was talking about gangs, and we spent some time talking about gangs and gang behavior. And one of the things that we talked about when we first got started is the problem of defining a gang. But how necessary it was to have a definition of a gang. Because how can we know what gang is and what gang behavior is and what gang crime is if we don't have an accurate definition of a gang that all police departments can agree upon and say, yeah, that's a street gang or that's a gang, right? So it's important that we be able to define and clearly state and understand what the problem is before we move forward. Information collection should or should not be a continuous process. Should. Why should it be?
Because it's always changing and you need information to keep going forward to fix problems.
Right. And as we change in our operations, what happens to the criminal element? Kill that thing.
It changed.
It changes also. I'll give you a prime example. One of the things that happened in Tazewell, where I was at, I'm old, y'all, was that we went for the longest time where we were battling pills, doctor shopping, people going here, going there, collecting pills. It was a real problem. Turned out that we were still battling the pill dilemma and trying to decide how we were going to take care of the pill dilemma, and the criminal element had already switched over to something else. You know what they switched to? Crystal meth. So we were battling a problem that was dying on its own. And while we were battling that problem, crystal meth was exploding right under our nose. So you have to be able to continuously gather evidence, or you're not going to be effective at what you are doing. A holistic investigation, again, involves what?
Is it new ideas?
Close, keep developing that. When I start talking to you about a holistic investigation, let's say we have a string of burglaries where push lawnmowers are being stolen. Let's say we've had 110 burglaries in our county over the past 30 days of push lawnmowers. I want to look at them as one crime, as one big crime. That's a holistic evaluation of crime. Instead of breaking them down and making each crime its own event, I'm going to look at it as a big picture, a holistic view. Intelligence-led policing stresses officer accountability. True or false?
True.
True. All right, I'm a little more than halfway through with this. I'm not going to go any further because I want you all to have the opportunity to look at what you've got and be ready to ask me any questions you have about that, and we'll finish our review on Thursday. Anybody got anything they want to add, comment, bring about, ask? Be ready. We'll finish up on Thursday with the review. I really want us to finish strong. This has been a good class. I feel like you all got a lot from it, and I want everybody to finish up strong in here. Study, study, study. Come back to class on Thursday with some potential questions about the questions, the information that I've thrown out today. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you're ready. Questions? Have a good one. See you Thursday. Thanks, sir. I kind of felt sorry for you.
I don't know how well I did, but
You did all right. I mean, given the circumstances, it wasn't your typical 100A self. However, given the circumstances and how bad you felt and how you were pushing through, I got no complaints.
I think I got one more I gotta take, make up.
Kenneth
So,
did.
Jason last week, and he said that
Kenneth
if you
missed
guys
classes,
still
he
want
said
to
his
go out
mom
this
was sick.
weekend, you can,
That's bad.
he's
You
on
know
the
when I
ground.
review?
But if
Send him
so,
one of
I need to kind of know, just so I can get a babysitter. Jason said he's on Friday, if we don't know that, right, yeah. But if so, I need to try and start planning for a babysitter, you know what I mean? I'm down to do it, I don't wanna make plans to go and then, you know,
Right.
end up being able to go, you know what I mean?
But I never actually paid my dues, so I never actually joined. However, I got another email recently saying that I was eligible to join. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and pay my dues and join. I can do that, even though I'm not gonna be able to participate very much. I like to at least, be a part of the team. So,
Okay, sounds good. When you graduate then?
like, next week. So I can technically be a part of it, but I can't, I'm not gonna be able to do anything.
That's cool with me. I'm not sure. The thing is that they have, every semester they have an amount of points you've gotta get from
Yeah.
meetings and services and whatnot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how, I don't know how they handle that.
I mean, that's why I think I got the email saying I was on suspension, because I didn't get 5 points. But I never actually, I went to, 2 meetings, but I never actually joined. I think they thought I did, but I never actually put in I never paid the due.
Do you know Michelle, Grandma?
Yes, I think so.
She works in the exec, well, she runs gamma here. So,
I mean, I can join online, like I can go, I've already looked at it, I can just go pay the dues and now I'm a member, but I'll be able to do it.
yeah, I don't know though, I'm not sure. I would probably ask before I just went ahead and paid, because I would hate to tell you to go ahead and pay and then them say, which it wouldn't be my decision, I mean, it would be the committee's, but, I would hate for you to pay and then them say, well, you don't have enough activity points, you don't have enough time to be able to make those points, so blah, 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 and give you some, or not give you, I'm not sure what they would do. I can't imagine that they wouldn't give you accreditation if you paid and you had GPA, I'm not sure. So yeah, I'd probably ask them before I pay, and just to make sure with them, because, I would hate for you,
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
pay money
That's
unnecessarily.
why I haven't paid yet, because taxes come.
Yeah, I would give you a definite answer, but I'm really not sure. Huh?
So I don't have an extra $16
Yeah, I don't blame you. But I mean, if you can get it, if you talk to them and they say, yeah, absolutely, then, I mean, it's great to be able to, because when you, this is the reason that I want it, is so when I graduate, if I graduate with a 3.8, but I would have been honors, I don't even know if you can say I'm graduating with honors. I'm not sure if you can or not. So I went ahead and took the second round with the honor society, that way that way they're able to that puts good people to say that they're able to get honors for the society. And in fact, it's National Credit Society, which is for a bunch of colleges. It is good. It's not a small society like just one school. So, yeah, if you can get it off of a transcript, definitely wouldn't hurt if somebody asks. Plus you can, I mean, you can always say I get like a 3.8, and if people generally think about college, it's generally with air travel, they probably don't know what that means. But, if you tell them, you were in honors regardless of if they know what a 3.8 is, they're gonna know good levels of it. Is it? Okay, I'm not sure what honors was, I was just making an example. You have an essay, that's awesome. That's right, you said it. Hold it down. Yeah, that's crazy, but if those classes, if you're not using those classes for your degree. Oh, really? I remember when you were asking. They just told you no, huh? They just.
Yeah, I mean, they worked a couple of weeks. They said, the only way they can give you those credits is if you take
The courses over again here. Really?
have to take 4 years off of school, 4 years consecutive, and everything before those 4 years. I have to have 4 years of consecutive no college participation.
Yeah. That's kind of, yeah, that's kind of stupid way to set that up.
Yeah,
But there's a ton of other ways that you can set it up that would be better.
that's what I was telling them, hey, for the 12 years, you're not competing with
Yeah. Right. Well, if you get that honors on there though, and you just tell people that, then that might raise an eyebrow or something. It might be a good job person to have next to you. But, I would really talk to Michelle before I paid any money or anything like that, just to get 100% confirmation that you'd be able to do it and everything, because they're successful. If she gives you thumbs up, go ahead and do it. She runs everything. So Michelle's getting involved. She's been involved with her stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, her office. When you walk through the main doors in the basic science building, you got the elevators and stuff. You got that lounge over there to your left. You walk around like you're heading down to the bathroom area. Stacey can tell you. But if you walk down that hallway, hers is right there. It's the only office. It's directly to the right of the soda machines in the basic hall. So if you're standing there by the soda, you look to the right, you see a door, that's her. You'll just knock on the door and